It's the end of day one at DC at TCT, and with me is Deepak Bhatt, who needs no introduction. Deepak and I always do, it's sort of a little roundup of the day, so let's start today with Leaders Free, Deepak. Leaders Free, an interesting study, a sort of a follow-up of a study from the European Society of Cardiology.
That's right. So this is a study of a drug-eluting stent, one that's not currently available in the U.S., but it's available in other parts of the world, versus a bare metal stent in patients perceived to be at high risk of bleeding. And these are the longer-term data, and basically what was seen before holds up. That is, the drug-eluting stent beats the bare metal stent. So not only is it as safe, in fact, it seems safer. So from my perspective, I think it's pretty good.
Now look, the first time around though, they said, or at least the folks at the spin at ESC said, why bother with a drug-eluting stent when a bare metal stent is equivalent? And I looked at those data and said, really? Because the late target lesion revascularization was higher in the bare metal stents, and if you're going to spend healthcare dollars bringing the patient back for another procedure, do you really win?
Yeah, I didn't actually see them present the data at ESC, but my interpretation of the original paper and this presentation is that for sure this particular drug-eluting stent beats bare metal stent in patients that are high risk of bleeding. And I'm willing to even generalize and say that in the US, the 2 or 3 second-generation drug-eluting stents that we've got would also beat a bare metal stent.
All right, well, you and I agree on that one. Okay, let's move on. Since we're talking about stents, let's talk about bioresorbable scaffolds. They don't even call them stents anymore.
Right.
So bioresorbable stents, bioresorbable scaffolds, tricky business. Initially, huge support. This is going to be the greatest thing since, I was going to say sliced bread, but the greatest thing ever. And is it, in fact, now panning out?
Well, I'm going to go against what I think is the conventional interventional cardiology majority opinion and say, I think we need to be cautious. To me, this is a replay of what happened with the first generation drug-eluting stents. Over exuberance, and then disappointment, and then the potential to set back the field. Now, personally, I think the bioresorbable stents will eventually pan out, but I'm putting my money on the second generation. The first generation, there's definitely a safety signal with stent thrombosis, as the Absorb 2 trial showed, and there was a hint of that in Absorb 3 as well.
Okay, so I interviewed Antonio Colombo earlier, and Antonio made some interesting points. He said, first off, the stents are getting better, the scaffolds are getting better, and thinner and more pliable, and you can spread them out a little bit more, etc. And he thought that with better apposition, in fact, many of these issues would go away.
Yeah, I agree. The first generation stents of this flavor, I think you need to do IVUS or OCT. You need to make sure they're well expanded. Don't want to use them in small vessels. All those things are true. All those observations are true. But that needs to be proved prospectively in a randomized clinical trial before these things are just thrown in willy-nilly into patients. And that potential exists. I've seen a few press releases from hospitals in the U.S. talking about, I put in, the first one of these in my region. And yeah, that's nice, and I get it. You want to be cutting edge, but you want to do what's safe for patients, right?
I agree. So we're 2 for 2 on agreement anyway. That's unusual. So number 3, this whole business of cardiac support during high-risk PCI. Is the Impella better than the intra-aortic balloon pump? Is the intra-aortic balloon pump better than crossing your fingers and passing 2 cat femurs over the chest? So what's the latest?
Well, this was a randomized study, a pilot study of mechanical support with the Impella versus balloon pump, and it didn't show any better results with the Impella, higher rate of bleeding and vascular complications as you might expect with the larger sheath size. So, it was negative. There was also a meta-analysis, similarly underpowered, published, that also showed no benefit of the more advanced mechanical support systems, namely Impella. So, I think it's a word of caution. It's a lot more expensive. It intuitively makes sense that it should be better.
It does.
But, I think the company needs to step up to the plate and do a proper trial and prove it.
I agree. I think we need a big trial finally. We've been back and forth with this now for, 10 years?
Right.
And everyone says the Impella makes so much sense. It does.
I agree.
On the other hand, we can't prove it. And sooner or later, we have to have a good randomized trial to find out what this really means.
Yeah, and especially when stuff's expensive, I don't think in medicine as physicians, as physician leaders, we can keep saying, well, my gut tells me that it's better than what we're doing right now. And my gut does tell me that, but, The hospital administration is going to say, prove it.
Enough is enough. We need to have a good trial.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.